So foragers' dwellings are not elaborate in terms of again we're getting back to architecture, right? So foragers or hunter gatherers, their dwellings were not elaborate because it was all about time. They didn't spend a ton of time on them. It was quick. They served their function in terms of hot, cold, protection from natural elements. Um, Many times temporary and are a lot of the structures are temporary. They could be blown over in a storm, but you build them back super quick. And are focused more on the family social gatherings. Are usually done outside of the shelter, like I said, at the fire, rather than inside. So inside doesn't have as much space. Again, what's fascinating about this is we can see this in different culture groups. America tends to focus much more on the house and or the property, isolating a family group or individuals from the overall society. This has leaned more and more this way. We used to have kind of more common parks. I think it's making a comeback, hopefully. In Europe and even in Asia, we see more commons. We see community gardens. We see community areas, parks. All of those things are much more kind of focal point in a lot of other culture groups. And the individual large house, like we have here in the United States and Australia, is not the focus. So it has a lot to do with kind of our social versus individuality kind of spectrum, where we lean on that spectrum. Pastoralists, portable dwellings like tents, teepees, and yurts. The chief and the council would be at the center of camp, position of home, equals status. So I talked about this already. The chief would be in the center of that. Yeah, so the chief or the leader, the big man, big woman, whatever that looks like, would be at the center of camp. And again, the position of home equals status. At the state level, architecture is usually on a grid pattern or urban planning are huge. Kitchens and other inside spaces reflect cultural changes. Um, Again, I've seen a bunch of these transitions even in my life, right, where most people have gone to the open kitchen look rather than kind of have a closed-in kitchen so that food is one place and then hanging out is another. A lot of even spatial stuff has changed within our culture. Decorative gardens are state level development. So having like gardens and kind of landscaping is much more of a state thing, like where we have these things. People might have pet gardens in their backyard. Again, this is state level. Um, Heterotopia, Foucault talked about, Michel Foucault talked about a mixture of plants, design, dress, and architecture from all over the world into one location. This is kind of like we get like a hodgepodge mixture kind of style garden architecture. It's just kind of what people like from all over the place mixed into one location. Museums and culture. I'm going to be very honest. I have a love-hate relationship with museums. For one piece, I love that you can go to a museum and see things like this in the picture and get some history to it. The issue that I have a lot of times is that a lot of these things are out of place. Again, let's say that this is a particular exhibit in New York or London. This is obviously a sarcophagus from Egypt and is out of place. I think this confuses children and early learners, and even can confuse some like people into adulthood. Again, I know that everybody can't afford to go to Egypt to view those things, so I get that. I get the place of museums. However, museums were kind of a bastion of antiquarianism where people would put collections into them so that home countries wouldn't try to take them back. So there's some interesting things around museums. It's an institution that collects, preserves, interprets, and displays objects on a regular basis. I think misinterpretation, displaying things out of context can also be problems. But again, like I said, I have a love-hate relationship because I do go to them. Um, I like the Van Gogh Museum, to be honest, in Amsterdam. Uh, but that is like Van Gogh. He's from that area, so it makes place. It's in situ, is what we call it in archaeology. But again, uh, I don't go around bashing museums. I wonder um, who they're for, what the audience is using that information for. So for me, it's more of an analysis piece. It's a cultural kind of analysis on what museums function is. If it's to function to just educate the population, most of them probably do that. Um, If the function was, and a lot of them come out of this to collect things, then I don't know that it's kind of serving its uh, I don't know that that has a positive function to it in terms of uh, taking things and looting things from home countries, which was done from Egypt uh, a long while ago. Um, a lot of times the purpose is aesthetic, educational, or political. Like I said, stolen artifacts. Museum anthropology study how and why museums collect what they collect. So there's actually anthropologists that go around and study museums and do more analysis than I'm talking about at a deeper level. Repatriation is the term that's used to discuss returning objects to the original people that they're from. Like, for instance, this sarcophagus here should probably go back to the museum at Cairo. Um, but again, maybe somebody's paid for it. Maybe it's been in the family for a long time. These are where things get complicated. And contextually, remember, anthropologists like things contextually. We start to lose a lot of the story if we don't have things in context. Play, leisure, and culture. Play may be unnecessary, no utilitarian purpose, limited in terms of time. It has rules, contains chance and tension. So again, some of these could be games. It could be sports stuff that we have. Think of your typical kind of baseball game. 9 innings is the term limit. It has rules. It contains chance, and it has tension. Um, but does it really serve a purpose in terms of societal function other than entertainment? Probably not. Leisure can include reading, TV, laying on the beach. And we put these things in here because they kind of fit well into art and culture. Gertz, Clifford Gertz talked about games and sports like rituals and festivals, which equal models for culture. And children learn culture through this process. So Gertz would be kind of on the side of Boaz in terms of learning culture through this art and sporting style. I mean, I just hung out with my brother this last weekend, and he talked about how his daughter doesn't really participate and doesn't really enjoy soccer that much, but he sees it as a good thing for her to learn kind of the team aspect of things. And again, if we're moving more towards working as team in jobs, then maybe that is a good trait to kind of teach children. She's much more of a gymnast and an individual kind of sport person. So we get into this kind of learning of culture through this process, and Gertz would have kind of used that as an example. Blood sport can be bird fights. This is actually what Gertz studied in Bali. It's kind of fascinating. Bullfights, MMA, and boxing, those are all blood sports. Really to a whole nother level of human. It's not symbolic war at this point. I mean, the purpose is really to injure something. Massage is an interesting thing that comes up in terms of leisure because it tends to be painful, but it's seen as a leisure activity. And one of those things that you do when you spoil yourself is to basically get beat up by a masseuse that's supposed to provide kind of long-term benefits at the detriment of your short-term pain tolerance. So this is an interesting thing that anthropologists could study as well. Tourism, colonialism, and material culture. This is a picture of Mount Fuji. And so this is a dear and near topic for me. There are over 1.1 billion international tourists. This number keeps going up. They have major economic impact. So a lot of times we talk about the economic impact, which is we're bringing money into these locations, and isn't it wonderful? Some of the issues that arise out of this is that it can lead to cultural degradation and unauthentic cultural experiences. I'll give an example of what is happening in the Yucatan. Because the Yucatan is getting so many visitors to Cancun, buses and buses are being bussed out to Chichen Itza, which is now kind of a modern or older. It's been voted on like Machu Picchu is one of the wonders of the world, and beautiful pyramid and great Mayan ruins and stuff like that. What they're starting to do in the Yucatan and have been for years now is to create this kind of unauthentic experience, which is making up maybe Mayan dances and dressing people in unauthentic ways and selling so-called Mayan goods that are actually made in China and it's not artisan. So these are the economic activities that come with money coming in from tourism. And again, this is markets, right? This is how markets respond. Um, However, one of the positives that can come out of that is that it reinforces local cultural identity. What I mean by that is, prior to Chichen Itza being this location which a bunch of people are showing up to, I'm not so sure that a lot of Mayan people who have moved to the Yucatan or moved from the Yucatan into Cancun that were serving drinks and helping, at the hotels and stuff like that, would have been super keen on claiming their Mayan heritage. When I did my research, every Mayan person that I talked to was very proud that they were Mayan. Most of them spoke the language, most of them still practiced the religion to a certain degree. So what I got out of it was that actually the tourists showing up and going to these locations that they all had experiences with and wanted to talk to you about was reinforcing their cultural identity as Mayans. So this is the tough part, how to balance them. We may end up buying some trinket from China, even though it looks like a Mayan mask and it breaks in 2 seconds. That may be offset by us kind of reinforcing a cultural identity so that they then continue kind of using their language and passing down some of these traditions. So that's one of those ones that we have to weigh out. Syncretism, art, performance, and art have hybridized based on Western, Eastern, and indigenous interaction. So we have to think about, again, what is the original traditional indigenous kind of dance and art looking like? How is that mixed with the Western aesthetics? How is it mixed with Eastern? A lot of these things are tying in, and we can kind of start to analyze some of these things and see what place they all have. So this is going to move us into kind of another topic. Again, the online class causes us a little bit to scrunch together some topics that maybe not be totally related. Like language worked out really well, religion did too. This is going to be kind of moving from art, because it's kind of its own special subject, into people on the move and immigration, migration, and those kinds of things. So with all that art stuff, keep that stuff in mind. And now we're kind of switching gears into this other aspect of things. Migration, by definition, movement of a person from one place to another. Push-pull theory is a hint. You're definitely going to want to know that. Push-pull looks like this. We can be pushed out of our home country. That could be that there is religious intolerance, a civil war, something like that literally blows up your house and you are forced to move. That's a push out. That's the push. A pull is where maybe we see the economic benefits in another country as pulling us to that country. So I'll be honest, when we moved to Korea, it was an actual push-pull combination. One was my wife was laid off from her job, and then we could both get good jobs, better paying in Korea. So that's the pull. So there's a push and a pull. Being evicted from your home, that's a push. Hearing that Nevada has, or Oregon has, less state income taxes and has better jobs, that's going to be a pull, because you're not actually being pushed out of your home. So push-pull is important in terms of hint moving forward. Internal migration is movement within the country boundaries. So that's what I was just talking about. I've had a bunch of friends move out of California up into Oregon. I had relatives years ago move into Georgia. So a lot of times this is the internal migration aspect that we're talking about. And if we're looking at even within country boundaries, even within the state of California, there's such vastly different regions that we can almost look into kind of internal migration in that way as well, right? I moved down from the Bay Area out of Sonoma County, which is vastly different from the county that I currently live in. So again, this is almost a version of internal migration, even though it's not country boundaries. It's when they cut a state. So you need to think of internal migration as that in terms of that too. We packed up and moved our lives, which is migration. International migration is when you actually move out of the country. This is what we did when we moved to Korea.